$500 a day. That was the fine, and the notice taped to my gate said the bulldozer would arrive in 30 days if the barn was still standing. They picked the wrong rancher. My grandfather built that barn with his own hands in 1952, 17 years before Cedar Hollow Estates existed as anything but open pasture, and the woman who signed that notice never once asked the county whether her HOA's boundary line was even correct. It was not. By the time this was over, the fine was not the only thing that got reversed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 6 weeks before that notice appeared, I did not know the name Carol Whitfield, and Carol Whitfield had no idea her own survey was built on a 6-foot mistake. If you have ever had someone in a position of small authority treat a rulebook like a weapon, stick around, because I have a feeling you already know a version of Carol. My name is Wade Ferris. I am 51 years old, and I run a working cattle operation on 340 acres outside Bellamy, Texas, land my grandfather homesteaded in the early 1950s. I spent 9 years doing contract fencing and boundary work before I came back to run the ranch full-time. So I read survey documents the way other people read the news, every morning, out of habit. I keep 3 rules when someone tries to push me around. First, I never match anger with anger, because a calm voice makes the other person sound unreasonable by comparison. Second, I confirm everything against the county record before I say a single word in response, because assumptions are how people lose these fights. Third, I let people build their case as far as they want, because the deeper they go, the more they hand me. Carol Whitfield was about to hand me quite a lot. Cedar Hollow Estates, the subdivision bordering my northern fence line, elected Carol Whitfield as HOA president 14 months ago on a platform she called Restoring Community Standards. She had spent 30 years as a county permit clerk before retiring, and she carried that job into her new role like a badge. 2 months into her term, a resident filed a complaint about an unpermitted agricultural structure visible from the subdivision's back fence line, meaning my barn. Carol did not drive out to look at the actual property line. She pulled up an old plat map from the county website, measured roughly with a ruler on her monitor, and decided the barn sat 11 feet inside Cedar Hollow's boundary. She never ordered a real survey. She simply believed the map was right because in her old job, the map had always been right. The first letter arrived on Cedar Hollow letterhead, citing Section 9.4 of the Community Covenants, unauthorized structures within association boundaries, and gave me 30 days to remove what it called an unpermitted agricultural building or face escalating fines beginning at $500 per day. I read the letter twice, then drove to the Bellamy County Clerk's office and requested the current recorded survey for both my property and Cedar Hollow's platted boundary. The clerk, a young man named Devin Marsh, who had only worked there 8 months, pulled both files without much comment. But he did mention that Cedar Hollow's developer had requested an updated boundary survey 3 years earlier after a drainage dispute with a different neighbor, and that survey had never actually been filed, only requested. Carol was working off the original 1997 plat, the one drawn before any of the later corrections existed. I paid for certified copies of both documents, $22 total, and had them in a folder before I ever wrote back to her. Paper outlasts pressure, I told myself in the parking lot, folding the receipt into the same envelope.
How many of us actually assume a boundary line is correct just because it is printed on an official-looking document?
I mailed Carol a copy of the certified current survey, along with a short, polite letter stating that my barn sat 14 feet outside Cedar Hollow's actual boundary and requesting the fine notice be withdrawn. Carol did not withdraw anything. Instead, she brought the dispute to the next HOA meeting, describing it to the other board members as a neighboring landowner disputing a clearly documented violation. She did not mention that I had sent a certified survey. She told the board the matter was under review by her personally, since she understood these records better than most people from her years at the county. 3 board members nodded along without asking a single follow-up question. A fourth, a retired engineer named Priya Nathan, asked whether anyone had independently verified the boundary, since I had apparently produced a certified document contradicting the HOA's claim. Carol told her the newer survey Wade Ferris provided had likely been altered or misdated, and that she would confirm this herself. She never contacted the county to confirm anything. Word moved through the subdivision within days, the way it does when a board meeting gets recapped over fences and driveways. A neighbor of mine, an older man named Ruben Castillo, who had lived on the county side for almost as long as I had, drove over one evening to tell me Carol had been describing me at the grocery store as someone trying to steal land through forged paperwork. Ruben did not believe it, he said, but he thought I should know what was being said. I thanked him, wrote down the date and what he told me, word for word, and filed it in the folder next to the certified survey. 19 days after the first letter, a demolition contractor's truck pulled into my driveway before I had finished morning chores. The driver, a man in his 30s named Chase Bolin, stepped out holding a signed work order from Cedar Hollow Homeowners Association authorizing removal of an unpermitted structure encroaching on association property, scheduled to begin that morning. I asked him to wait exactly 10 minutes, went inside, and came back with a certified survey folder. I laid the documents across his tailgate and pointed to the recorded boundary line 14 feet south of where my barn actually stood, while inside my own property under any version of the map. Chase studied the papers for a long moment, then called his own supervisor, reading the certification numbers aloud over the phone. His supervisor told him to stand down immediately and photograph everything before leaving, since demolishing a structure on the wrong side of a disputed line would expose the company to a lawsuit no insurance policy would touch. Chase apologized, photographed the documents at my request for his own company's file, and left without touching a single board of that barn. I called Devin Marsh at the county clerk's office that same afternoon and asked him to formally flag the file, noting that Cedar Hollow's HOA had authorized demolition activity based on an outdated, unfiled plat. He said he would note it, and he did, in writing with a timestamp. Paper outlasts pressure. Chase Bolin's company understood that faster than Carol Whitfield ever did. Cedar Hollow's own insurer requested a formal review after hearing a demolition crew had been sent onto disputed land without independent verification, and that review forced an emergency board session 6 days later. I attended at Priya Nathan's direct invitation, since she wanted the actual documents present in the room rather than summarized secondhand. Devin Marsh appeared as well, carrying the county's official comparison between the 1997 plat Carol had relied on and the corrected boundary survey from 3 years earlier, the one that had been requested but never filed, until Devin personally located and formally recorded it that week to close the gap once and for all. The correction showed the boundary had shifted 6 feet during a drainage realignment, moving Cedar Hollow's actual line further from my property, not closer, meaning the barn had never been within the association's jurisdiction at any point since the subdivision existed. Carol argued that she had acted on the best information available to her at the time. Priya asked, in front of the full board, why the best information available had not included a single phone call to the county clerk's office in 14 months of citing that boundary in official HOA correspondence. Carol did not have an answer that survived the silence afterward. The board voted that evening, 4-1, to formally withdraw all violation notices against my property, to reimburse me for certified document costs, and to require independent county verification before any future boundary-based enforcement action. Carol cast the single vote against her own board's decision. Paper outlasts pressure, and by the end of that meeting, the paper had outlasted her entire case. News of the reversal moved through Cedar Hollow faster than the original complaint ever had. Ruben Castillo told me the grocery store conversations flipped almost overnight, from questions about forged paperwork to questions about why a 30-year permit clerk had never once called her own former office to confirm a boundary before threatening a demolition. Carol resigned from the board 11 days later, citing personal reasons in a 2-line email the remaining board members forwarded to residents without comment. The one retaliation incident worth documenting happened 4 days after her resignation, when I found the certified copy I had mailed her originally taped face down my mailbox, torn at one corner with no note attached. I photographed it exactly as I found it, logged the date, and filed a report with the county for the record, not as an accusation, simply as documentation. Nothing further happened after that. Devin Marsh later told me the corrected survey I had pushed him to file properly ended up resolving 2 other boundary questions elsewhere in the county that had been sitting unfiled for years, which was not something I set out to fix, only something paper happened to fix once someone finally looked at it. On HOA True Tales, we do not chase drama. We document it. What would you have done in my position and why?